welcome to the Patriots 300 Level Podcast. My name is Eric, and I'm joined by my co-host, Kevin. Welcome back after a few-week hiatus for our 29th episode, where we'll be recapping the Patriots 2022 offseason so far and discussing some upcoming potential moves and dissecting other moves around the NFL. As a reminder, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Pat's 300 Level Pod for up-to-the-minute updates and commentary on news of the day. So, Kevin, not as exciting of an offseason as last year so far for the Patriots. I know Patriots Twitter world has been going crazy, at least that first week or two. Same with some Patriots media, talk show hosts, or reporters. What are your thoughts on the move so far? We'll start with the offense. We'll just discuss some of the losses and then some people they retained and added, and then we'll move on to the defense. But on the offensive side of the ball, what are your thoughts so far?
Yeah, I think really what we've seen really on both sides of the field isn't surprising. We mentioned this on our last episode before it kind of went on break, that not to really expect much, not to expect what happened last year, because the Patriots' MO is to do what they're currently doing right now: sit back, wait for those second, third tier players, and get them not when everyone's trying to overpay for them. So it's not terribly surprising. I think the Felger and Mazes and the Evan Lazars and everyone else that are like that are all up in a bunch because they haven't done much. Have to just calm down. The world isn't ending. This is something the Patriots do all the time. And if you look out there, there's a bunch of talent that's still out there in the free agent group. And they're not going to overpay for that. So it's not terribly surprising. Looking at the offense, like you said, not too many major losses at all. Just list them off: Ted Karras, Shaq Mason, Gunner, Brandon Bolden, and Jakob Johnson. I would say of the five, I would say Shaq and Ted Karras were probably the biggest losses of the five. I don't think the other three are really severe at all, and they're really replaceable, especially Jakob Johnson hasn't been that well. He's been up and down. But I'd say Shaq Mason, even we saw it last year. We saw it the year before as well, where he's been not as consistent as he once was before. So it's not surprising. It was something we mentioned prior to, is look to be a surprise cap reduction with him, and we were right. We thought maybe it would happen a little bit later on, but it's not terribly surprising it happened. I'm a little surprised just for a fifth rounder, but looking back at Logan Mankins trade, I think they got a fourth rounder and that tight end from the Bucs. Tim Wright. So,
and then Logan Mankins was a Hall of Fame quality card. Shaq Mason is like a Pro Bowl, perennial Pro Bowl, but he's not at that same level Logan Mankins was.
Yeah. And then Ted Karras, they're giving him a boatload of money to be their center, which, number one, I wouldn't want him to be my center because I don't think he's athletic enough to be center. He's dependable at center when he's there, but he doesn't give you what like David Andrews does. And to pay a guard that much money for someone where he's very dependable in there, but I wouldn't go overpaying for something for that position. So it wasn't surprising. I wouldn't have paid what the Bengals had paid for him. So
and then his deal was what, 3 years, 18 million?
I think so, because I think they offered him originally 3 years, 15.
Yeah.
And then lowered it to 3 years. I think 13 when the day
12 or 13.
For agency. So
so like when I initially saw, like I had no idea what Ted Karras was the wild card for me because I like him. He had a really good season. I just had no idea what his value would be in free agency. So that was one thing I was really interested to see. At 3 years, 18, I was a little surprised the Patriots didn't match it because it's not $6 million for a starting guard isn't that much. But also, I don't know if he is you might be able to get better than him in the draft or in free agency, someone else that becomes available. So I wasn't too shocked about him. Shaq Mason, like you said, I wasn't surprised at all he left, other than I was expecting a little more for him. But like you said, for guards, it's not too surprising. Gunner, I wasn't really expecting him to come back. Brandon Bolden is replaceable. And Jakob Johnson, this is just one I wanted to go over very briefly. I know he's had an up and down career. Even this year, he had some really good games. He had some bad games. I was just I wasn't surprised he left. I'm surprised the reason why he left, where reportedly he told a German newspaper outlet that he left because he was told his position is no longer on the roster. So, what are your thoughts of them not going into next year with at least a traditional fullback?
I don't think it's terribly surprising because we kind of mentioned this before. I think previewing the up and coming season. If not, it's something we've talked about in the past. Where Dalton Keene, the whole reason why he was drafted is they initially wanted to go that more athletic type of fullback, having that hybrid of a tight end slash fullback, and kind of like that Aaron Hernandez sort of route. So. I don't think it's too surprising, and we've seen this with the NFL anyway. The fullback position itself is not. I would say not every team has a fullback nowadays, just because they're going that more athletic route. And right now, they could use Dalton Keene for that if he's developed, or at least use Jonnu Smith for that. So I'm not terribly surprised with him saying that. It can help free up and kind of utilize them in different routes and make them maybe more effective than they were last year.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. I think just for me with the Patriots, you're used to them traditionally having a fullback, where there was the early 2000s run when they had Patrick Pass or Heath Evans or Larry Centers. And then they had James Devlin for the late 2010 run. And then they went to Jakob. I can't remember like the late 2000s, early 2010s, if they had a fullback, and if so, who it was. But I could see them using Dalton Keene or Jonnu Smith or some type of hybrid in that format, or just going two running backs in the backfield, having both Harris and Stevenson to try and catch the defense off guard, and going with two tight ends as well.
Yeah. And I think too, there's other ways that they can do it. If they really need that ground and pound goal line, they could bring in a defensive lineman.
Yeah, which they've done in the past. They did that with Vrabel before. They did that with Richard Seymour. Blanking on, there was someone in the middle 2000s who they drafted as a defensive tackle. Then they moved to fullback, and then that's where his position was the rest of his career, both with the Patriots and in other ways. So there is, like you said, there are ways to do it.
Yeah. So now going to the offense for their retention, not any sort of groundbreaking names, things that we did expect. James White, which did surprise me a little bit, but based on his contract, it is kind of a prove it deal. Yeah. See if his hip is healthy enough to play. Trent Brown, which I am surprised about, just based on, I thought there would be a team that might try and pay him. And then Jacoby Myers, Brian Hoyer, and James Ferentz. I would say the biggest two of these would really just be Trent Brown coming back at that pretty reasonable deal with heavily incentive laden, which I had called for. If coming back, I only want him on an incentive laden deal because we saw last year that calf, he only played half the year, and then he started somewhat faded towards the end of the year as well. They didn't give his all.
And that calf thing is also something that plagued him back with the Raiders as well.
Yep. And Brian Hoyer just gives that stability at the quarterback position, gives that extra type of coach for Mac, especially with some of the changes that have happened with the coaching staff. So just having a more senior voice that knows the playbook really well and that can help with that. But I don't think Mac needs too much help, but I think this would help.
Yeah, no, I agree. I wasn't too surprised with Trent Brown. I was actually expecting him just because he's always said he loves the Patriots. He loves playing in this system, and this is where he's played his best football of his career. He made a boatload of money with the Raiders, so money really wasn't an issue. When he first came to the Patriots, when he was drafted by the 49ers, he was a 7th round pick, and then he came to the Raiders. And then he came to the Patriots. He hadn't really made his money yet. So that Raiders contract was the first time making money, essentially. So he's made his money. He knows that he plays well with New England. I wasn't shocked if he was going to take a hometown discount to stay here. And then, like you said, it was a very reasonable contract. James White, I thought he'd either retire or come back to the Patriots on like a 1-year prove-it deal. I have no idea if he's going to be healthy or if he's going to be the same player, but it's at least good to have that voice in the locker room, even if he isn't able to play. And then Jacoby Myers, I think we all knew he was coming back. It's just good that hopefully they can get an extension, like a 2 or 3 year deal, just so you can keep. He's someone that's dependable. He's not flashy. He's not going to be 1,500-yard receiver, but he's someone where on third down, you need the ball, you need a first down, you can look to him and he'll catch it. So it just adds to the wide receivers, which we'll get to in a minute. They don't have that flashy Cooper Cup or Stephon Diggs, but they have a pretty solid, dependable group now after with him and not Jacoby Myers, Kendrick Bourne, who I love and I hope they utilize more, along with Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry at tight end, and now you add Devontae Parker. I think that's a pretty solid group right there. And just like we'll just get into right now, the two additions that they made on offense from outside the organization are Ty Montgomery, who's a wide receiver, running back, returner, who might fit that third down running back role that you're missing from Brandon Bolden leaving, and then James White if he's not healthy, and then trading for Devontae Parker. I loved the trade for Devontae Parker. I think he's one of the most underrated wide receivers in the NFL. He is hurt all the time, which is a concern, but he's on a very reasonable contract, and he's someone that, even though he's only 20, he's in his 8th year in the league and 29, but he's still fresh enough where he can be the Patriots' number 1 wide receiver. And then having Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne, and Jacoby Myers as your 4 wide receivers, that's a pretty solid group.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the trade compensation, just having him in a 5th round pick this year for next year's 3rd round pick was basically getting him for free, because next year's 3rd round pick is basically traded as a 4th round pick this year. So you're moving back 1 round, where the talent is about the same ish. There is usually a steep drop off from round 4 to 5, but this year is a pretty decently deep draft. And you're getting a very solid wide receiver, probably not a number 1, but for most teams, but probably a number 2, but a very dependable wide receiver. Nothing that's going to he's never going to run by anyone. He's not one of those explosive speedsters like a Hill or a Diggs, but he's a tough receiver when he's playing. So he can go up and catch the ball, a really good 50-50 ball player. Even when he's covered, he can be open. And I think that's something that the Patriots have missed so far, and something that he really, and a lot of people at first when the trade happened said, oh, Aguilar's going after this. He's going to be your X receiver, and Aguilar is not going to have that position. And that's not going to be the case, I don't think. So Aguilar and him are completely different wide receivers. Aguilar is still going to be that take the top off the defense, spread out everyone else, and have that speed, whereas Parker is that tough boundary wide receiver, what Harry was always supposed to be. So this is more for showing that Harry's going to be gone from this roster because he has no spot. He really kind of replaces Harry. He does everything that Harry's supposed to do better. And the only thing that Harry's probably better than him, and not really better, but Harry's just bigger. So Harry's got, I think, about 30 pounds on him. Same about height. So he's got a little bit more strength on him, but Parker is a much better wide receiver and a really good boundary wide receiver, which they have been always trying to get. And just the other thing, he can kind of break away afterwards. After he catches the ball, he's really good on that second level. Not something where Harry, a lot of times we'll see he'll catch the ball and he's going to get tackled by a 5'9" cornerback. And that's not something you really see with Parker. He plays a little bit bigger than he actually is. So I really like this trade, assuming he stays healthy. And even if he doesn't stay healthy, it's still got him for nothing, basically. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and the thing with him, I think his style of wide receiver is just perfect for this offense, which is why I love this trade. Assuming he stays healthy, which is no assumption. I think he's only had 1 year in his career where he's played all 16 games, now 17 games, and that's the year when he had 1,200 yards. Also, I think this deal just kind of shows why Twitter was overreacting that first week of the offseason, where everyone was freaking out. Oh, you didn't get Devontae Adams, and the Raiders got Devontae Adams. Oh, Tyreek Hill got traded within the division. Well, look at the contracts that they got. They got 4 years, $120 million, 5 years, $150 million. That much contract for not only one player, but a wide receiver is just insane. Where if you just wait, you can get better value, which is what Bill did and which is what Bill always does. That's why everyone was overreacting this offseason. And I don't know if the Patriots will be Super Bowl contenders this year, but the way that you build a consistent contender is having value throughout the roster. So I think that this trade just shows that you can't. The first week of the offseason doesn't win you the Super Bowl.
Yep, 100%. And then we'll kind of get into that Tyreek Hill trade a little bit later on, because I have some thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Going on to the defense, losses right now, really the biggest major one is JC Jackson. Something surprised me a little bit, but as we got closer to free agency, it wasn't terribly surprising. And then Kyle Van Noy and Chase Winovich, Van Noy being cut for cap reasons, Winovich being traded, and they got Mac Wilson instead. So kind of a swap there. And Dante Hightower is probably going to be a loss unless he comes back on a cheap deal, but we'll see what happens with him. He may be one of those players where he's waiting for a certain number. If he doesn't get it, he's not going to play for anything less than a certain amount because he's made a lot of money. He's played a lot of time. Yep. He may not be willing to come back for $1 million or minimum or something like that. And to hit on Jackson, I still don't fully understand what they did with him as a player and asset. So something just more of the questionable route of Bill. One of the few questions I've had with how he's kind of managed assets the last few years. So it'd be Jackson and then Joe Tooney previously, even Tom Brady, where you're letting all of these players go in their prime and not get anything for them. I'm completely fine with saying I don't want to pay JC Jackson $18 million or $20 million guaranteed a year. And I don't think he's a top 5 cornerback, so I'm not going to pay him that, but at least get something for him. So it would have been better off if they were to have tagged and traded him, or even traded him at the deadline last year. And Joe Tooney, the same thing. Why do you tag Joe Tooney to have him play 1 year where it doesn't matter and then not get anything for him because you don't get even comp picks for him because you signed all these players last year. Whereas if you let him walk before, you would have gotten a comp pick for him and you would have had an extra $14 million. And then the other thing too is if Joe Tooney's worth $14 or $15 million, why is JC Jackson not worth 17 and a half or 18 on a tag? That's just the one thing I don't fully get. I think based on some of the contracts we've seen for corners lately, I think Jackson would still fall. I think Jackson would have pretty good value at a tag. That's the biggest kind of question mark I have. I'm completely fine with you saying I don't want to pay him long term. He's had some issues down in Florida when he was there. Maybe you don't like his character. Maybe there were some reports that he wasn't always on time for meetings and all that sort of stuff. But I don't think they managed the asset of him that well. And I think they've had a history of doing that where they're kind of late on assets and not getting things in return like they used to before, where Seymour, you would trade him, you got a first round pick, and other players as well. So it's just interesting your thoughts there.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I was surprised that they didn't tag him just to trade him or keep him at that 18. I think part of it just has to do with they were cap struck this offseason where they didn't have a lot of room. And one of the concerns might have been if we tag him with the intent of trading him, we might not be able to get as much value where right now we know we're not going to be signing many free agents. We'll at least get a 3rd round pick next year. If we tag him, teams might know, even if 18 million isn't a lot for number 1 corner, but knowing that I'm not going to trade a 3rd round pick or higher for someone that only has 1 year left on his deal and might not re-sign with me, or knowing that you're going to have to make other moves and you're going to have to get rid of him anyway. Why wait with that value and just wait till the value goes lower? So that might be part of it. Like we saw Amari Cooper was traded for a 5th round pick. Hell, even Shaq Mason was traded for a 5th round pick and we thought it would be more, and his was a much more reasonable contract. So it might just be, I know in the 2016 season, we were shocked that he traded Jamie Collins for a 3rd round pick when you were saying, if you just let him go at the end of the season, you'll get a 3rd round pick anyway. And then Bill's response was, you don't know we'd get a 3rd round pick comp back, but it's just who Bill is. It is what it is. I wish they got more, but I don't know. It could also be that they don't think he's worth that much money and they didn't want to risk having him stuck with that much money.
Yep.
And I know he had some good moments, especially the second half of the year. He was inconsistent the first 6-7 games, and I commented that a lot during that stretch. I'm really interested to see how he does this offseason or this upcoming season, because he's going to be the number one cornerback, and these are the wide receivers he's going up against: Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams. I thought they're playing aren't the Chargers playing the Dolphins?
Oh, maybe. I thought you were going to say in the division.
No.
Okay.
I updated that since then. Tyreek Hill once, Devontae Adams twice, either Cortland Sutton or Jerry Jeudy twice, DK Metcalf, Cooper Kupp, AJ Brown, Jalen Waddle, or it might be Tyreek Hill, depending on who he covers in Miami. DeAndre Hopkins, Deebo Samuel, Amari Cooper. Those are the wide receivers he's going up against. So we'll see this upcoming season if he's really worth that huge contract he got from the Chargers.
The other thing too, just to add to where the Patriots may be saying too, we may be playing more zone this upcoming year.
Yeah.
And is JC Jackson worth, or any cornerback worth, $18 million playing zone, where I can get something very similar for $5 to $10 million. I think that's a big thing where realistically they need to go more man, but if they can't get anyone else and it's just JC Jackson, they can't go man. So
and even this past season, during their 7-game winning streak, they were playing mostly zone. Mm-hmm. So it's not like they were playing man as well. So he did well, but it might just show that they are shifting more to zone, and you can be successful having a zone defense.
Yeah, and the big part is just the pass rush, and we'll get into that later on.
Yep.
The retention right now, Devin McCourty, Henry Anderson, Juwan Bentley. Henry Anderson was a little surprising. They must have went to him asking to take a pay cut. If not, he was going to get cut, and he probably realized there wasn't really much out for him. He didn't play last year. I really liked Henry Anderson the first 2 games, I think. And I thought they really had a good run presence when he was in there and was calling for him to play more. And then he got hurt. So once they did start playing him more, that's when he ended up getting hurt. But interested to see how he'll do this coming year. McCourty, I think that was a great deal. I think $6 million cap hit. Really helps solidify that back end of the defense, and has the knowledge of the defense, especially with JC Jackson leaving, just having a dependable voice back there. And Juwan Bentley, I don't like him as an every down linebacker. I think he really improved this season. I think he's really good he's much better against the run than he was before. I don't like him on the passing downs. I don't think he's fast enough, but for a cheap deal that they got him on, I'm happy to have him back and have him there for that first down kind of run defense.
No, I agree with everything you just said. Bringing back McCourty is huge. Even though I thought he lost a step this past season, having that leadership in the locker room, especially with losing some other leaders, at least in the secondary of JC Jackson, is going to be helpful. Henry Anderson, one of their weak links the last few years is run defense, and both Henry Anderson should help with them retaining him, that should help. And then Juwan Bentley, bringing him back. If they lost him, that linebacker core, I don't know how they'd be doing against the run in general. So bringing him back on a cheap deal, someone that is good against the run, is definitely going to help their defense. So I thought all of them were good retaining.
Yeah. And then some different additions, and some of them more surprising than others. So Jabril Peppers, Malcolm Butler, Matt Wilson, and Terrence Mitchell. So for biggest surprise of all of them would be Malcolm Butler. I think that really shocked all of us when we saw that.
I was not shocked.
Well, it shocked me when I woke up to that alert that he was coming in for a visit, just based on everything that happened with prior. But the other thing that's also not surprising if you think about it, Bill is very good about putting past grievances aside, especially if it's going to help him win. We saw this before. Ty Law, he almost had Ty Law come back one time, but
Jamie Collins
signed. Yeah, Jamie Collins. It happens all the time. And if Malcolm Butler can help resurrect his career, I think it's going to be a great signing. It's a very low cost, low risk. He did he did somewhat lose a step his last year he played. He did take last year off, so maybe that might help kind of refresh those legs.
Yeah.
But if he plays as well as he did before, it's going to be a steal of a signing. If not, then it's no risk really with this. But this may help kind of soften that blow of losing J.C. Jackson, especially if they do draft a top corner as well in the first couple rounds.
Yeah. And we don't know how successful that corner will be.
Can't be in the second round. They can never draft a second round corner. And I will completely go against them drafting a second round corner. I actually don't really want them drafting anywhere in the second round. But they've
had some success. Gronk.
I think they moved up every time though.
Yeah, that's true.
Gronk they moved up for, right?
Yeah.
And then Barmore they moved up for. So if they specifically target someone in the second round, I'm fine with that. If they're sitting back waiting in the second round, I do not want them picking there. I want them.
They traded back for him, but
yeah, I don't know. But most second round picks are big flops for them. So I get very nervous about them picking the second round. And even first round, Devin McCourty was a first round corner, and he's not even a corner. So
yeah.
We'll see how that goes.
Yeah. So I just want to, before you go into the other ones, just want to touch briefly on Butler. I wasn't surprised because last offseason, I actually thought they might sign Malcolm Butler. They didn't. I know I texted you saying I thought that I wouldn't be shocked if they did, because after Super Bowl in 2017, during that offseason, reportedly Bill talked to Malcolm Butler and said, I know you're going to go into free agency. If you don't get the deal you want or you're looking for, come back to me and we might be able to work something out. So he made amends with him, at least on that front, trying to show that we can put things aside. Granted, he went out to Tennessee, got his money, deservedly so. But so I wasn't too shocked that he might be willing to come back. I know in 2020 he didn't look the same as when he was with the Patriots, but he wasn't bad either. He was, he'd be a starting corner for, I'd say, at least half the teams in the NFL. So we'll see what happens, especially with him being off this past season, if he's lost a step, if he's maybe even fresher. But I think he's a little bit of a wild card, but it's low risk, high reward, especially with that contract.
Yeah, I completely agree.
One thing is I'm interested to see how he plays as a zone corner. I don't remember how he played with Tennessee, but when he was with the Patriots, he was mostly man.
Yeah, because the Patriots from 2011 on have switched more
ever
to
since
the
they
man.
ever since they got to lead, they switched to more man.
Yeah, and so it's interesting to see them go back where they will need more pass rushing if they're going to be a zone defense.
Yeah.
But the thing, kind of thinking about that, which is a little bit more interesting, is the Jabril Pepper signing.
Yeah, I love that signing.
If his ACL holds up and he's able to not start on pup and able to start right away and look the same, I think he could be a huge signing. So he's kind of one of those Adrian Phillips hybrid players where you could put him anywhere, and he's bigger than Phillips. So he's got more kind of bulk, where the way that I see how they've kind of set this up is they're kind of going where they could use safeties as linebackers as safeties, have these players all over the field where you have more speed on defense. That's one of the biggest things we said at the end of the season. They were too slow. They couldn't cover at the linebacker position. So the way you solve that is by having bigger safeties that can be linebackers, but also safeties that can cover with those running backs and cover with those inside people. And I think the other thing too is Malcolm Wilson. I know he was kind of a disappointment with the Browns, but he has shown stuff, especially when he was at Alabama. Some people say he actually came out of Alabama too soon. If he stayed next year, he would have been drafted higher. He's got that athleticism. He's been able to show that he's got that quickness and speed and that coverage skill that they need. So he could actually end up being a big trade as well. I still don't like the fact that I think they misutilized Chase Winovich. I don't think he's a great edge. He was good at his specialty role as being a specialty pass rusher. I know he couldn't hold up on the edge, but I still don't understand why they didn't try him inside linebacker, where he did show some promise that one Baltimore game that he I think the same thing could happen with Uche if they don't end up sticking with him in the edge, and if they have him just stay in no man's land, I would want it to see him an inside linebacker because he's quicker, he's faster, and he can provide what you really need there. But I just think with the Peppers and Wilson, everyone that they have right now, they've got like a million safeties on the team. I think we're going to see a lot of that hybrid nickel. More so than even before. So it should be pretty interesting to see what happens.
They also have Josh Bledsoe, who they drafted last year too, and they're high on him. So you have 5 safeties. Last year they had 3 safeties that played more than 80% of the snaps. I see them really going with 4, maybe even 5 safeties on the field at a time, especially if you're not playing man as much, you're playing zone, you're able to do that. And you're just faster all around the field. You're not going to be able to be beaten as much. And I just love the Pepper signing. He's so versatile, and he's someone that sort of like Jamie Collins when he came to the Patriots initially with that athleticism, Bill can just utilize him in certain specific ways. And then Mac Wilson, he had a lot of potential in Alabama, and I know Bill is close with Saban, and he might be able to someone that just comes to mind where he was drafted, had a lot of potential coming out of college, and then just his first stop wasn't utilized correctly and just didn't show that, was Kyle Van Noy. In a different setting, he flourished. So I'm not saying Mac Wilson's going to be Kyle Van Noy, but that's like the high reward would be someone playing to that caliber where you get that potential out of him.
Exactly. All right. So moving on, special teams.
And then just one more is just Terrence Mitchell, who's a cornerback that they signed. Low money. I don't even know if he's going to make the roster, but it's just a depth piece to see what happens.
Yep. All right. Moving on, special teams. Really, really quick here. Big Kick Nick was retained. Not terribly surprising. Actually, a little surprising that they gave him a 2-year contract. Usually they've been going year to year with him, and I thought that he was fine with that. But maybe this is kind of reward him for everything he's done so far. I'm completely happy staying with him. He's been by far probably your most dependable player on your team the last.
I thought he was your MVP in 2020 and even 2021. I'd say he's your MVP.
Matthew Slater retained. Bill had some really high compliments for him, saying he's the best special teams player he's ever coached in his life, and also one of the best special team players to ever play the game. Saying that he is the greatest at his position. And his coach also Brady, who's the greatest on offense, and then LT, who's the greatest on defense. So he said he's had the privilege of coaching the greatest at their own side of the football, for each of the different kind of routes. And the one thing that is surprising so far,
not surprising.
Well, so far is Jake Bailey. No movement with him. I
have a suspicion why.
So my suspicion is that they're trying to, before extending him, they want to see what happens in the draft and where Araiza falls. If he does not follow them, they will extend him, lower that cap hit. If he does follow them, that's when they may draft him, have a competition camp, and then probably cut Bailey. I don't foresee them not doing anything with him. So I don't see them going into, if they don't draft Araiza, I don't see them going into the year having him at a $4 million or $3.5 million cap hit going into the year. I think that's insane for a punter. They're definitely going to do something to free up some cap, and especially if they've identified if it was an injury issue. If it was an injury issue and you don't foresee an issue with him, I definitely extend him below that cap hit. He's probably one of the best punters in the game, and deal with him that route.
Yeah, my suspicion is, like you said, I think that Bill sees Matt Araiza, wants Matt Araiza. I'm also biased because I've been saying this since the end of October, and I want to be proven right. And I've been following him since then, and he was on a team that was ranked in the top 25, and he was the team MVP, and he was just a punter / kicker. So I think that says a lot about his talent. Seeing him at his pro day and at the combine, where his punts were just ridiculous. 5.5 second hang times for 60+ yard punts. There was one where it was snapped from the 35. He punted it to the 1 yard line, and it bounced back, and it was down at the 3. So he has the talent, and I also like the ability that he is a pretty good kicker. I don't think he's NFL caliber right now, but if that's something where he's able to develop, you can develop him into a two-way kicker / punter and then save a roster spot. So that's something I think Bill would possibly check as well. So I think that's why they haven't done anything with Bailey. Why extend him if the person you want you're able to get? I just don't know. He's Areza's such a wild card that I don't know if he'll go in the 3rd round. I don't know if he'll last till the 5th round.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of a shame that everyone's kind of going on to him ever since we've been calling for it. But we'll say it again. We've been saying it from October. This is way before anyone else has called for him to be drafted. So,
and we have the Twitter proof to prove it.
All right. So going on, needs to be addressed really quickly here. I think this is pretty much everyone understands. Guard, cornerback, interior defensive line, edge, and linebacker. I think the biggest one really that could solve a lot of issues here would be interior DL if they can get Davis from Georgia. I think that would solve a huge amount of issues for them. They could put Davis in the middle. He would take up the you basically account for everything. You wouldn't have to worry about the run. You could imagine him and Barmore together, because then Barmore could play every down because you don't have to worry about him being a little bit undersized in the middle. It would just solve a bunch of issues if you get him. And this could be the type of player that Bill moves up for. We've seen it before. He identifies a player that he likes a lot, and maybe he might.
He moved up for Vince Wilfork.
Yeah. So I would be like Randy, what's his name? In South Park if they drafted him.
Me too.
So next biggest one I would say would be corner. They need to find someone somewhere. They don't have much depth from a youth perspective. Realistically, the youngest corner they have really that they've somewhat developed right now is what's his name? The short kid, the undrafted one.
Miles Bryant,
and he's a hybrid corner / safety, and he's undersized and he's not a top corner. So they really need to
Sean
find
Wade
someone.
too. Sean Wade,
that's a big one that everyone forgets about. Where they may be high on him. It's really unknown how he's going to do. But he is kind of X factor. Maybe they might have something with him. So, but they really need another corner though as well.
And then one thing I just thought of, so I just want to say briefly is after the 2014 season, when Darrelle Revis left, Darrelle Revis was your number 1 cornerback. Brandon Browner was your number 2 cornerback. They both left in free agency. They went into the offseason and then the upcoming season with Malcolm Butler, who they projected to be their number 1 corner. I know he had the game-winning interception in the Super Bowl, but he didn't start at all, and he was barely used until the second half of the Super Bowl. They just were high on him all year. He didn't fully develop yet. And then he just shined in the big moment where they might think some of the cornerbacks they have, Miles Bryant, Sean Wade, after the full season under their belt, second season for Miles Bryant, and then a full off season, they think maybe they might be able to develop into that player where Malcolm Butler, from going undrafted, barely playing his rookie year, was all pro caliber that next year, starting as a number 1. So
I think that's fair. I think there were some signs with Butler though, even from preseason where he was showing really well, and you had to keep an eye on him. I would say edge and linebacker, I don't think are top priorities. Probably middle linebacker if they think that they need one more. It depends on how they feel about McMillan, and then with the guy from Michigan. But they may not need some help there if they think that they're going to develop and be a solid piece there. Guard, they're going to need at least guard and probably a tackle as well. Because I don't know if Wynn's going to be on the team going into the year. I wouldn't be surprised if they find a trade partner for him. If they find someone in the draft they really like at tackle and draft him.
That guy from Northern Iowa.
Yeah. And then guard, that's not really tough to draft. We've seen a lot of people get good guards at anywhere from 3 to 6 to 7. Hell, when it was a 6th round pick.
Mason was what, a 4th or 5th, and he
Mason, I think it was a 4th. David Andrews was undrafted.
Undrafted. Brian Stork was the 7th, I think.
Yeah, so they're really good at finding offensive linemen anywhere in the
Dan
draft.
Copen was a 5th.
I wouldn't think they have to go crazy to find a guard. Tackle is a little bit harder, but even so, they still might find someone. But I think their biggest need is corner going into the draft. Find someone. Wide receiver, I would like them to get like a speedy slot, and they need to develop someone that Matt can have going forward. They don't have a single wide receiver on this team that signed through past 2023. Parker, I think, Parker and Bourne, I think, are signed through 2023. I don't think they have anyone past that. So
they have Hunter Henry is through 20 for tight end is through 23, and then John Smith's through 24.
Yeah, but they don't have a single wide receiver that's past 2023. So I think they really need to get someone to develop to stay with Mac for at least 5 to 10 years. I think Bourne could be one of those players too. But someone, another reliable piece for him.
Yep. No, I agree completely with everything you said. I think cornerback is the number one priority going into the draft, just because one condition, unless they're able to get Stephon Gilmore or someone of that caliber through free agency or trade, I still don't think it's happening, but the longer he's on free agency, the more of a possibility it is. But I think cornerback is a huge need, especially with the wide receivers you're going to be going up against this year. And then I think interior DL, I'm huge on Davis. I want them to get him. I don't think he's going to be available. I think his combine showing is going to make a team overreach for him at, say, like 13, instead of if he just had a combine that most people thought he was going to have, maybe he'd go 17, 18, where from 21 to 17 isn't that unreasonable to trade. 21 to 13, 21 to 12 might be too tough, but we'll have to see.
And if we saw last year, I think in people moving up that far, I think had to give an additional first round pick.
Yeah.
And that's not something they're going to be willing to do. If it's a first and like a third, or a first and a fourth, then I could
first
see
and
them
maybe a future second if you think you're going to do well next year, maybe something like that. But
I would be mad if they gave up a second.
I won't either. I'd do first and second for Jordan Davis.
Yeah.
I think edge is slightly. It depends on what you think, where you think Uche is going to be, what you think of Wise. I think you're going to need to get pressure, especially if you're switching. Or Perkins too. I don't know if they were just redshirting him like they did with James White and Damian Harris, or if he's just someone where he's going to get cut. So it depends on what they have and if they think they're going to be able to get pressure or not. I don't think it's a huge need if they think they're going to be able to get pressure with Uche and Perkins. If they don't, I think you have to get someone, whether it's first round, second round, third round. You need to get pressure this upcoming season.
Yep, 100% agree. News around the NFL. It's been a wild ride. This last month or so. I think we're gonna try and touch on it as fast as possible. We're getting near the end of the episode. So I'll just list everything. We can kind of talk about the big guns here. Tom Brady unretired. Unsurprising to me. Maybe a little surprising to you. I had no reservations. I am surprised it's still with the Bucks. But we not really surprised anymore. Aaron Rodgers staying in Green Bay, a little surprising there. Russell Wilson trade to Denver, a little surprising there with the location. Deshaun Watson to the Browns, Carson Wentz to the Commanders, Trubisky to the Steelers, Devontae Adams trade to the Raiders, Tyreek Hill traded to the Dolphins, Chandler Jones traded to the Raiders. And then Von Miller
signed with the
Raiders, not traded.
Yeah.
Von Miller signed with the Bills. Bruce Arians retiring after Tom Brady unretiring, which is the most, if anyone believes that there was no correlation between the two of them, other than with believing what Bruce Arians said with, Tom Brady coming back, put the organization in a good spot where I can actually retire. I've got a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you because you're a moron. Yep. So there's a complete correlation between him retiring and Brady returning. I don't think Brady ever wanted to play for him again. That's the whole reason why he retired. Threw his old temper tantrum. They wouldn't trade him when he wanted to come back. He floated that idea around even a week into his retirement. I might be willing to come back. I'm interested in the 49ers. So it's not surprising whatsoever. He's a complete Um, we've seen a little bit more of his colors lately, where he's trying to just get exactly what he wants.
Yeah.
It's not a great look, I don't think. Even though Bruce Arians is a moron, your last two head coaches you've tried to get rid of, so
Yeah.
I don't think it's a great look for him.
And then I also don't know how much of an upgrade it is from Bruce Arians to Todd Bowles.
Yeah, the man that called it all out blitz to lose your season
and have a safety cover the best wide receiver in the NFL.
Yeah. I think the only other couple things I'd really want to hit on myself would be just Wilson going to Denver. I was a little surprised though. I thought he wanted a bigger town. Deshaun Watson to the Browns. I'm still interested to see how this plays out. We don't know what's going to happen with. There's even some more lawsuits I think out there now. The contract that they gave him was insane. To fully commit that much money to a man where I wouldn't have traded and given him. I wouldn't have done a deal for Watson in the first place, because the way I see it, there's 22 women out there. Odds are, and if you read the SI story about him, the amount of detail that these women go into and the fact that they haven't talked to each other, it's very. I'd be very surprised if they're all making it up, if they're all saying a very similar story, and a little disturbing of a story. Not even a little, very disturbing. And the fact that if he did this before, what's to say he's not going to do it again? And usually with people like this, it's, if you do it once, you're going to do it again. He may be good for a year or two, but what happens in year 3 or 4 when he might be getting a little, I think he might be fine there. So I would just be concerned about giving up that much capital and money, and especially with, you still don't know what the legal ramifications are. I know they cleared him from the grand jury, but what's to say they might come up with more evidence afterwards and have another grand jury against them. A grand jury clearing you doesn't really mean much. It just means the evidence that's there right now isn't enough, but doesn't mean more evidence can come out against them. I just wouldn't want that person on my organization. Who knows? Maybe this will completely blow up in their face, and I'm actually kind of rooting for that, because I'd find that to be hilarious that it would happen to the Browns, because it always happens to the Browns. And then just the last thing I want to just talk about was Tyreek Hill to the Dolphins. That's another situation where I would never give up, first of all that trade capital you gave for him, and then all the money that you give to Tyreek Hill, where he's had a bunch of issues off the field before, and he's going down to South Beach now. And what's going to happen when he has all this money? He's in that area. There's all those clubs and everything like that. I think it's gonna be a recipe for disaster. And then he's got Tua as his quarterback, and that's going to completely blow up in their face, where Tua has all of these weapons now. If he does nothing with these weapons like he's done before, they're going to completely ruin any trade capital they had of him from before. Everyone's going to realize it's completely useless if they have.
People might have realized that already.
Yeah. So I think that's just the other thing. And then there's one last thing. Carson Wentz, the Commanders. I don't know what the hell they're doing. Like the guy's a life loser. He's a complete loser. I wouldn't give up. They give up 2 third-round picks for him. I wouldn't give up a 5th-round pick for him. I think he's a complete loser. You saw him in the game against the Patriots. They were definitely afraid of even having him touch the ball. He just stinks. And they would be so much better off if they got Jimmy Garoppolo, or even Baker Mayfield, or even have Ryan Fitzpatrick be their quarterback. I would take any of those 3 over Carson Wentz. I don't get it. He's a loser. He's a moron. And I wouldn't want him in the NFL.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think another one that you didn't touch on, I'll just touch on quickly, and then I'll recap some of the ones you did, is the Devontae Adams to the Raiders kind of shocked me, especially the deal he got. It was like 5 years, 150, something around that. I think it was like ended up being 28 million a year, which is insane for a wide receiver, but kind of set the market for the other wide receiver signings of Tyreek Hill when he was traded to the Dolphins and signed, and then Stephon Diggs today, 4 years, 104 million. But it kind of shows that he was Aaron Rodgers' number 1 receiver for years and turned down more money from the Packers to go to play with Derek Carr. Granted, Derek Carr was a college quarterback, but still, that doesn't really look too highly on Aaron Rodgers. And then Packers gave Aaron Rodgers $50 million a year to be their quarterback, and they're not able. He doesn't have any receivers to really throw to. So just a little surprising. The Deshaun Watson thing, he's such an immense talent. Granted, he had this whole year off, and he's probably going to have at least half this year off because he's going to be suspended minimum 8 games, maybe 12, maybe the whole season. So I'm interested to see what he's like when he comes back, but he does have some weapons with Amari Cooper, and they have Chubb and Hunt at running back. So it should be interesting, but I offline, I texted you this weekend, but this would be the most Browns thing to happen if, say, they don't end up trading Baker Mayfield, because if they cut him, they eat that whole $18 million contract that he has remaining. And if no team wants to trade for him, Deshaun Watson is going to be suspended 10, 12 games of the season. Let's say he's suspended 10 games and you start the season with Baker Mayfield. If what the most Browns thing to happen would be the Browns end up going 8-2, 9-1. When Watson comes back from his suspension, they turn it over to him because they gave him all that money. And then they just crumble down the stretch, either probably lose first round, second round, and then they just waste a whole season where they're at that point, they're the number 1 seed in the AFC. That would just be the most Browns thing to happen. And I wouldn't be shocked if that actually does happen.
I think the most Browns thing is that their organization gets destroyed by him going to jail.
Yeah, that too. And then with the contract they gave, I'm going to preference by saying this. I am not equating Deshaun Watson and what he did to Aaron Hernandez and what he did. But if you do something where it's cut, where it's worthy of being released, like the Patriots had to release Aaron Hernandez, other teams, Raiders had to release Henry Ruggs. If he does something where it's of a caliber that he has to be released, they can't release him for 3 years. If they release him next year, the dead cap money is more than the salary cap for the entire team. It's just insane. So you're just going to have to suspend him and everything. You'll have to pay him that $40 million a year, but you physically can't release him from the organization for 3 years.
Yeah, it's nuts. It's just crazy how they structure that contract.
Yeah. I think just some of the, not going into any particulars, but just some news around the NFL, how it relates to the Patriots, is the AFC appears to have gotten a lot better this year, with Russell Wilson coming to the Broncos, Devontae Adams going to the Raiders, Chandler Jones going to the Raiders, Von Miller coming to the Bills, Tyreek Hill going to the Dolphins. Actually probably hurt the Chiefs, which I think up until even this year, I think they were the team to beat in the AFC. So that's at least good for the Patriots' point of view. I don't see how Hill, even if you give a crappy quarterback great weapons, we saw in Tennessee, Ryan Tannehill had AJ Brown and Julio Jones, at least for part of it. In Arizona, Kyler Murray, who I think is an overrated quarterback, had DeAndre Hopkins, AJ Green, Zach Ertz, and there's a couple others I'm forgetting. Just because you give them great weapons doesn't mean, if they don't have the caliber of being a great quarterback, doesn't mean they're going to utilize it well. So it doesn't worry me that much that you're going up against Tyreek Hill twice a year when your quarterback can't throw it 30 yards. And that's how Hill beats you. Plus you have success against Hill, but it's just going to be interesting to see how the Patriots do, where last year they were the 6th seed and they have fifth seed?
5th or 6th. I can't remember.
Yeah. But I mean, they were 1 game away from winning the division. So they were right on that edge, but the other teams around you, the Raiders, the Browns, potentially, the Dolphins have all gotten better. Bengals have gotten better where they improved their offensive line. So it should be interesting to see. I think it's going to be a tougher road, but even though the Patriots haven't really made as many offseason additions like you would have, or like Twitter would have liked, what they did last offseason should also help as well, where they signed players going into their prime, whereas these teams are all signing players currently in their prime. With signing players in their prime or going into their prime, you're expecting them to develop even more next year. Judon should stay the same. Hopefully he doesn't drop off, but Kendrick Bourne should get better. The players you drafted, Mac Jones should get better. Kyle Duggar should get better. Some of the, if you draft well this offseason, I think they have a shot of competing in the AFC for the AFC being for that crown. It's going to be interesting since there's a lot of other tougher teams, but those players getting better, I think that's something that a lot of people are just forgetting about.
Yep. And this is something we even mentioned last year, where year 2 is where we're looking to see all of these additions, where usually when you add all this amount of talent and a bunch of players, it takes a year for everyone to mesh and get better and learn the system, especially the Patriot system. So it should be interesting to see how that happens this year.
And then just on the offensive side of the ball is a lot of people are, I know Jonnu Smith had a very disappointing year, but if having a full season and another full off season under his belt, if he's able to learn the playbook and play like he did in Tennessee, or play even better than he did in Tennessee, just because he's another year older and doesn't play scared, I think that's just going to bring the Patriots offense to another level. Sort of like the 2010 season, where that was Brady's most efficient season of his entire career, other than maybe the 2016 season where he only threw two interceptions. But your wide receivers were Wes Welker was your number one, but you didn't really have that Randy Moss after you traded him a couple of games into the season. But it relied on mismatches with Gronk and Aaron Hernandez. And if you have those mismatches with Jonnu Smith and then Hunter Henry, along with Kendrick Bourne, Jacoby Myers, Aguilar, and Parker, I think that's something people are forgetting.
Yep, 100% agree. Any other thing you like to address, or you think you're good?
No, I think we're good. Should just be interesting to see what happens the next couple of weeks before the draft, and then we'll have a draft preview episode as well.
All right, yep, sounds good.
Be interesting.
So we'll talk to you guys in the next couple of weeks before the draft. Have a good preview there, and then discuss afterwards what happened at the draft. Did they draft up? Did they get Davis? What are they able? Did they end up? Did they get Matt Araiza? Did they trade down every single round to get a bunch of loaded picks afterwards? So it should be pretty interesting to see what happens. So
did they use Shaq Mason's 5th round pick on Diego Faget?
It could be possible. So thank you everyone for listening. Make sure you subscribe, rate, and review. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter at Pat300level pod. And then we're on YouTube as well. If you're catching us on the RSS feed, you can catch us on YouTube. And then follow us on Twitter. And eventually we will have a blog up one day. So that way you guys can read it. Just got to do a little bit more legwork on that. So thank you very much, and catch you next time.